yeah, so I want to just make sure everybody's connected before we get started. But I have some amazing things I wanted to cover with you guys today, and I want to share with you a different perspective, which is why we'll have a special guest that I will announce later that will be joining me on this podcast today. So, welcome in. Happy Saturday. Happy Thanksgiving break. I hope you guys all celebrated with family and friends and you spent time with loved ones. I know I did. I had a great time. We even went to the Festival of Lights yesterday here in South Carolina. It was awesome. Got time to spend with my sister and her family before she head back home, and had a amazing lunch today with some friends of mine because of my own personal transitions in ministry and in work life has been a God thing. It's been awesome. So yeah, so some exciting things that are happening right now. So we're live on all channels, and so in today's podcast episode, it's kind of packed, and I want to take us through a series of different things that have been happening and take us back to the historical context of those things too, because I feel like that's important to understand as we dissect what's taking place currently in our nation. And people document things about history because it's important for us to see how it repeats itself and for us to not make the same mistakes. I know there's a saying that we say, like, don't learn from the mistakes of others, right? Or you can end up making those mistakes yourself and learn that the hard way is what they say, right? So that's one of the key important things for us to learn the historical context of things. And for me, it does give me perspective of where we are, where we're headed, and what's taking place in our nation. And I think those things are definitely, without a question, important. And so we're going to first talk about the news, the things that's been hitting the news for sometimes very tragic news, and this is the National Guards. And before we get into talking about the National Guards and breaking down everything surrounding this story, I want to bring on a good friend of mine. This is Michael Lauber. He has a background in economy. He's also a political commentator. He is the CEO of Ex America News. He is well connected with some people in the Trump administration as well, and so he brings a different perspective than I do on a couple of different things. He even broadens those perspectives, and so I thought today would be amazing to have him in to shed some light on what's taking place in our nation and just give you guys those different perspectives. We're even going to throw in, of course, which very important in my podcast, which is the Word of God, and we're going to dissect those things too, where relevant as we talk about today's events. So, Michael Albert, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you as well. You. When we talk off camera, there are a lot of things that we agree on, and then there's some things, of course, that we don't always agree on. But you always present, convincing evidence and things about history and what we see right now. And I love your perspective, so I thought definitely it'd be great to have you on this podcast. So you can, give a different perspective than I do on certain things, or if we're in alignment on that, you can definitely expound on that, which you usually do. So,
Well,
love to
thank you. I
have you
really
on and
appreciate
discussing
that.
this. Yeah, yeah. I think I gave a great your repertoire very well of the things that you have accomplished. If you want to add anything that I may have missed, please do.
Oh no, it's just I feel very lucky to be here at Ex America News, be able to still run my show, The Insurrection, after all this time, and still growing the audience and growing our reach here, and hoping to push things in a better direction here in the country.
Yeah, I think you're doing that with the amount of responsibility you have with the network and everything. So thank you so much for having me on the network and so many other commentators too that bring something specific and dynamic to the field. Um, so I want to talk with you about this, tragic event that we just had happen with the National Guards in Washington, right?
Yeah.
So we had two National Guardsmen that were wounded and very critically wounded. One of them had passed away. It was the woman. I can't forgive me for not mentioning her name, but she was shot. I got news that she was shot in the chest, and then also the guy, this Afghan national that did this, came up close to her and then shot her in the head, which is why she was in critical condition and then ended up losing her life. And that was, I believe, this event happened the day before Thanksgiving. Um, Very tragic. And then from my knowledge, as of now, the guy that was shot by this Afghan national was is in critical condition, but he is still alive.
Yeah, that's my understanding of where things are currently. That I know there were some reports out that they had both passed away, but I think those were in error. I know that she passed away
Yeah.
after being shot. I mean, it really is. It's a tragedy, and it's yet another example of a senseless homicide that should not have happened to begin with. And we're gonna, I'm sure, dive into that more here in a few minutes.
Yeah, so I definitely want to talk, a little bit about this event. To my understanding, these National Guards were doing their job. This guy travels, I believe, 2,000 miles to where they are, armed gunmen, and he, shoots them and goes after the other guardsmen too. But then he was able to be brought down by, I believe, a guardsman that was National Guardsman that was nearby.
Yes.
I hope everybody's following me with that. Story is very tragic, but I want to talk about how this guy even got to the country and what led up to this event and how as Americans we should move forward from here. Like what should be done? What is our administration doing in regards to this? And what we're seeing happening around in our country, just in general with these immigrants with coming into the country not having pure motives or coming in and having ulterior motives. So, from my understanding, this Afghan national came under the Biden administration, and if we go back to the Biden administration, do you remember that whole botch operation that they had in Afghan, where he ended up pulling out our soldiers, you know, in a very disorganized and dangerous way? And immediately we saw on video that as these planes, I believe, are leaving the ground in Afghanistan, that the Taliban did not hesitate. They immediately started to overthrow the government there and take over. And then we end up leaving a lot of our weaponry there, which gave that basically went to them, and putting our soldiers at risk.
Yeah.
And also the Afghanistan uh, nationals that were there that weren't part
Yeah.
of
I
the
mean,
Taliban and were innocent.
yeah, like we left lists behind. They were hunting down and killing people that worked with us. And then a lot of the people that we flew out of the country, they're saying, oh, they were vetted, but they clearly weren't. I mean, you saw these planes full of people. We know that once they did show up in the U.S., I mean, again, keep in mind, we brought 90,000 people in, most of them unvetted. We didn't know who they were. Some of them were people that helped the U.S. military or the CIA, like the shooter. He had worked for the CIA previously. And I do want to correct one other thing. He did have an apartment in D.C. that I guess they're searched yesterday. That it was a small apartment, $2,000 a month, which is probably like a one-room shack in the D.C. area. Um, but this guy was a CIA operative that I don't know if he was working as a translator or what capacity he was working for the CIA over in Afghanistan. But yeah, this whole operation from the very beginning, from the Abbott bombing, we lost 13 U.S. soldiers in an attack there. They told snipers to stand down that could have taken out the suicide bomber ahead of time. It was a giant botched operation. And let's not forget, a lot of these weapons that we left behind there ended up being used in the October 7th attacks on Israel. A lot of the rifles they had were these same DPMS AR-15 clones that were supposed to go to the Afghan military, but said they're ending up in the hands of terrorists all over the Middle East.
Yeah, and then I think going from that, he has this whole open border policy, and I can't remember the name of this policy, but it kind of allowed resettlement for the Afghans here in the United States. It's kind of like an apology for messing up, for pulling our troops out so
Yeah,
disorderly and putting many people at risk, Americans and non-Americans. And so he does this thing where he opens the border and he allows a resettlement of about, I believe, 90,000 Afghans into the United States unvetted. And then what
mhm,
that also allowed is, I believe later they discovered that at least 58 of those people were actually on our terrorist list inside of our country
unbelievable.
because of that. So yeah, I mean, so this is in no vetting process, and then you have this open border policy, a resettlement policy that he put in play for the Afghanistanians, should I say?
Yeah,
Um,
the Afghans.
and Afghans, thank you. And it was something like humanitarian parole for what he
Yeah,
did in Afghan.
Well, and let's not forget either. We've already had numerous problems with those 90,000 that were brought over. There were at least 4 cases of child brides also being brought over, where they then had to charge the 60-year-old men married to 7-year-olds or whatever it was, or separate them and protect them. Now, I don't think they even moved forward with criminal charges in all cases. Instead, they cited cultural differences and just separated them. We've had them showing up at these college campus protests. Many of them, participating in violence there. But yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, the media is trying to run cover, pretend Biden somehow vetted these people and it was all an accident. But we all know that isn't the case. They may have vetted a small number of them. I know they had facial scanners that they were using to verify some of the ones that had worked for the U.S. military before. But even a lot of those people, we can't be just bringing back. A lot of them turned on our troops once they were under fire, or led them into traps or other things. And this wasn't exactly a great program. Now, I do want to save the people that really did go out and support our military, but the other 90,000, like you said, it's basically an apology. Oh, sorry, we messed up your country. Sorry, we spent 20 years and $10 trillion replacing the Taliban with the Taliban. We can't just bring over anybody that wants to come to the U.S., especially people like this, where their culture and their values and even their religion do not align with our values here in the United States. As we've seen with the Sharia law expanding in Dearborn, Michigan, and New York, and this Epic City nonsense down in Texas, they're not compatible with our values, our laws, or our way of life.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I see too is that the reason why these people, you have these Afghans that came over into our country, they're trying to escape the very people that we're letting in unvetted. And this is the same thing you see when you look at Venezuela and you look at the MS-13, MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. People
Yeah.
are leaving their countries to escape these people, and we're in the open border system is basically allowing them to follow these people from the country of origin, the country that they're trying to leave to get away. and
Hmm.
and we're trying, and this is supposed to be, America's supposed to be a safe haven. It's supposed to be the land of the free, the home of the brave, where you can get protected because we have the per capita to be able to secure our borders, to be able to go after these people that are committing heinous crimes. And if we're really not setting any precedent or any safety for these people when we have these open border systems like
Yeah.
this, which is what Biden did. And now we see the effect of this even so much more under Trump administration. And he keeps calling this out. He keeps calling, that this was a stupid operation from Biden. It was really erroneous of him to go and open these borders and not have a good system in play. Open borders just by itself is horrible. He keeps reiterating that, and I feel like American people are now continuing to see the effects of it. And then there's another side of that too, but I'll digress on that to keep us on topic here. And this is why I also feel another thing, not only just the people trying to escape these horrific conditions to come to the U.S., and then you have the same conditions following them, but
Yeah.
you also have, I feel, which is why we desperately need an ally in the Middle East like Israel, who can give us those surveillances that we need and let us know what's taking place over there, so we can see how much of a threat this is to our democracy and just around the world as well. What are your thoughts on
Uh,
that?
I mean, I think that's one of the big problems here is they do, our media softens the blow. They don't want to call the problem what it is and admit what we're really dealing with. And that, I'm sorry, but some of the, like I said a minute ago, a lot of these people are just not compatible with our values or our way of life here. If you think that it takes 4 women to equal the value of 1 man with court testimony and all the other suppression, and really abuse that's involved in Sharia law and a lot of what they believe, softening that and comparing them to, an American Muslim that's lived here for 5 generations and, doesn't take all that stuff seriously. These are fanatics. And that's the reality that we're dealing with. We have 90% support in a lot of these countries for acts of terrorism, that they do think the whole world needs to be a caliphate. These are not compatible with our way of life or our values. Let's bring in one other fact here too. So 48%, or at least 48% of the 90,000 that Biden brought in from Afghanistan are still reliant on welfare benefits. They're not working. They're not doing anything else. So after 5 years, I don't find any excuse for that. A few months while you're getting settled into place, maybe a year if you've got to learn the language or at least learn basics. But at some point, you've got to be trying to assimilate, trying to go to work instead of forming these little Sharia enclaves and then expecting the U.S. taxpayer to foot the bill for your way of life.
I think we're kind of seeing that they have a manifesto. And what we have, heard all of this time is that, this is a political ideology. It's not
Yes.
some like, oh, this is our religion, we're peaceful religion only, etc. And I love what Brigitte said is like the peaceful majority is irrelevant. They become irrelevant when you constantly have these attacks from those that are radicalized, and then the peaceful majority go mute or they even join. And you see these people, the part of their manifesto is that they can, or even in the Quran, they can lie to be able to push their initiatives and their ideology to get to a certain aim. They have a very systematic approach to this. And I also will quote what Dr. Ben Carson said when I was at a Turning Point USA conference. And he said this, and I thought it was very profound. And it keeps coming back into my mind because as Americans in our military, we're bad. We're really good. And when I say bad, I mean like, we have it down pack. We are we are the top of the top when it comes to our military and the equipment that we have, especially with the AI and all that now coming in. But Dr. Ben Carson said that our enemy cannot beat us militarily, so they attack us from within. And you
Yes.
constantly see that taking place with the mayoral elections and these protests that people, like we saw Jews protesting peacefully, but then they're being hit with from pro-Palestinians supporters, Palestinian supporters, with different types of bombs and different types of weaponry as they do their peaceful protests. Or like you mentioned, as being a part of Harvard and in Columbia University and shutting down our schools and
Yeah.
not allowing these people who pay their money to be there to go there, abusing basically their, whole legality of being here in the United States,
Yeah.
abusing that visa.
Yeah, they ask for protections. Well, they're a minority group, but then once they have power, as we just saw in Michigan, in Deer, not Deerfield, uh, just outside of Detroit. As we just saw there, they shut down any opposition. The Christians that came in to do a march, they assaulted, went after. Yeah, some of them afterwards yelled back and said other things. We saw people get struck, and the police refused to do anything about it. They're looking at ways to charge now some of the people that were there at that protest using creative law. But this, Takia is the other thing you mentioned. They will lie to our faces to further their agenda. And I'm going to disagree with Brigitte Gabriel on a little bit of this because because they're not all slapping on suicide vests or participating in direct attacks on the American people, they're still participating in jihad. I mean, just them. I
Yeah.
mean, this is what we're seeing in Europe right now. Is two things that they all participate in. One is the taxes they pay at the mosque. The zakat, that goes back to fund jihad. That's the literal purpose. 10% of their income goes to fund jihad. The imam determines what that means. And yes, some of them use the money or part of it for like soup kitchens and other things that are constructive, but that is not the majority. And the other thing is jihad by moving into a new place that you're taking over by building up numbers. It's jihad through immigration. So that's what we're seeing here. 90,000. This is what has destroyed London. It's what's destroying France right now, and Germany. Germany's got, like, I think it's their top 10 cities are now all on the verge of bankruptcy because they've taken in so many boat migrants and people from Syria that still aren't working. 70 something percent of them, I think it was 78%, are not working after 10 years of being in the country, and they're still collecting welfare benefits. Germany used to be a cash positive, stable country in Europe. They were the ones issuing loans to Greece and bailing out other countries for poor decisions. Now they're about to be bankrupt themselves. And this is all part of the plan. It's destroying Western culture and replacing it with their own. And that is
Hmm.
jihad through lack of assimilation.
And I do think, like, when you destroy that economy, you get it dependent on the government, kind of like Hamas, right?
Yeah.
When you look at how they handled the economy there in Gaza, they had the people basically depending on them, even reselling back the food that the humanitarian companies brought in, reselling
Hmm.
that at a higher price, and the people had no choice, but to either starve or capitulate, right? So we see that this destruction of the economy, this breakdown where you have people mentally dependent on them, is part of that strategy, which is why I keep reiterating on my socials like that, this whole socialism with Zoran Mandani is a part of that. And some
Yeah.
people argue back and forth. You can argue all you want, but I think New York will learn the hard way. But I think Mandani move to meet with the president and humble himself will take him very far, of course. But
Yeah, well, I mean, he went right back to all his old talking points afterwards, and it is similar. It's the same thing. He did what benefited him in the moment. He went to this photo
yeah,
op with Trump, got out there in the media, helped soften his image, but in reality, he's gone right back to all his policies. He's still buttoned up against Kathy Hochul about the free buses and other thing. He still wants to do that. They just increased his pay package as mayor. I thought he was a socialist, but they just put that through before he could take office.
yeah,
And he's very excited about it. But yeah, I mean, he's just going to be a wrecking ball for New York City, and that's my one fear, is hopefully Trump does not bail him out, because he's going to destroy things up there, and we can't let it limp along on life support. So just to make him not look bad, we've if he's going to make bad decisions, they're just going to have to suffer the consequences. The rest of the country should not be bailing
yeah,
out individual states or cities that are throwing the switch and committing suicide.
yeah. Unfortunately, we're seeing. I mean, I love that we saw. I'll mention two things before throwing in going back to the welfare thing you mentioned and talking about Minnesota. So number one is we saw that the House of Representatives, it kind of came together, and basically condemned the what was it, CAIR, and I think it was a Muslim Brotherhood, or just
Hmm.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
We saw that, and I was excited about even seeing a little bit of unity of on this issue, because we see that the far left is kind of moving into that communist type mentality, socialist type mentality. So I was excited to see that the majority of the Democrats actually voted against that. And then the other thing is that I feel like what we're maybe going to see is a divide in states, because you got, which we will get to that, more, but you see a divide in the states where you see some states going towards this, socialist move, and being kind of okay with it and silent about it, and letting the Muslim take over and pray in certain areas, and disrupt their citizens, etc., pray very loud in the streets and all that. And then you see people like Governor Abbott, you know it's like it's just like a divide is happening in this nation, around this very same thing. And I'm like, we have to wake up, to this. And
Yeah.
I'll let you, if you want to comment on that. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
I think you're right. I think that's one of these things. They take advantage wherever they can. Our typical values as Americans is to be a melting pot, to be welcoming to refugees from other countries. But the problem is, like, now that system is being abused, and it's always been abused to some extent, but it's normally been very
Yeah,
small in comparison. But the problem has really been over the last 10 to 20 years, where now it's being taken advantage of in large numbers. And the people that are coming here are not coming here just to make themselves a better life. I think it was different. Even in the 1980s, there were 6 million illegal aliens in. They were supposed to do originally. Well, I guess they ended up doing like a mass amnesty, but originally there were supposed to be like requirements and other things for that. But by and large, they were mostly integrated in. They were working in jobs throughout our country. They were actually doing something productive. They still should have followed the rules and come here the legal way. But what we see today is mostly people coming over here to abuse the system. And it's the same thing in Europe. When you have the majority of them on the public dole, not working, not even working under the table. I mean, that's the problem. And then it's all the violence, the drugs, the other things that are brought over the border from people that are here to actively destroy us, whether that's people from the Chinese military, from the Middle East, from these gangs and cartels from South America. And that's why at the end of the day, we have to stick to our guns. We have to mass deport everyone that is here illegally, and and then if they'll leave on their own, there's an opportunity to potentially come back in to apply once we get all this settled. But otherwise, like, we have to focus on assimilation. That's been one of the biggest problems, is in areas like Springfield, Ohio, or Chicago, where you have all these little enclaves popping up, where you have 20,000 people from this country, and they're not really part of the city that they're in. They're their own little unit
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
within city limits. We have to have and demand assimilation. We have to be bringing in people that will build up America, that will make us stronger and greater, that are here to work, that do align with our values. And if you're not part of that, we don't need you. I mean, go make Afghanistan great again. Do something about the Taliban.
Agreed.
Seriously.
Agreed. That's just not
Um,
their manifesto, though. They have to spread it worldwide. They have to basically conquer the world. This is how their Messiah comes back.
yeah.
Um, you know,
Well, even
but we
outside,
you go.
well, I was just going to say real quickly, even outside of Islam, if you took all the people from Venezuela here that aren't part of Trinidad that came over the last several years, I've seen different estimates, but let's just go with the low side that it's around 1 million. I mean, that's enough to go overthrow Maduro. Go save your own country. So, I know a lot of them are families or whatever. They're not going to get involved. Well, sorry. Sometimes you got to do something. You got to step up. If we had encroaching tyranny here, there's a lot of people would step up to put a stop to it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
if you are from one of these countries, like I do feel bad for you, and it's not going to be easy, but time to go save your homeland. You better start thinking about that, because I do think we're going to start seeing real mass deportation sometime over the next 3 to 6 months. It seems
I
like
think that's why
something's
so many
shifting.
around the world. Yeah, I think that's why so many around the world are grateful for Trump, and I wish that more Americans can see what he's doing, when he does these foreign policies, or he tries to engage in peace deals
Mhm.
around the world, because you have so many people that are thankful for him. Like we talk about Nigeria and him getting involved. Like sometimes it takes the United States getting involved, because again, we're a superpower and we can make demands. We can make economic demands. Like he's been using that, swinging that tariff weapon, and that's been very effective versus putting boots on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Or doing a coup like we've seen under Obama. So it's out in the open. Everybody can see it. And he tells the media that he's going to put tariffs, and that country knows. And usually they begin to bend and move in a way that actually benefits, their citizens, instead of allowing some of them to be murdered, massacred, and not doing anything about it. And that's what I really appreciate, Trump's move in those things. He's not neglecting the homeland. He's still taking care of business here, but he's also, trying to establish peace in those areas or places that need it. And that just brings me to another thing, when we talk about the Bible immigration, because I was asked this morning about what the Bible says about immigration. I just broke this down, and the fact that you have, like, in Leviticus, I believe the scripture is Leviticus 19:33, where that talks about, sojourner, welcome them into your nation, and then treating that sojourner just like you would basically, and I'm summing it up, treat like a national person that was actually born there. Well, there's a Hebrew meaning for that, and that word sojourner actually means in that scripture that is somebody who came in legally and actually has the approval to be there, not
Yes.
somebody that's unvetted gets that benefit. And then you see the same thing repeated, even if we go back further. If you look at Joseph, for example, in the Bible, he was second in command to Pharaoh, and still he asked Pharaoh for permission for his family to live in Goshen. And then you can go back further than that, and you can look at Moses, when the Israelites were crossing into a new territory. I cannot remember the actual name of this. The man over that nation, but I remember Moses taking the Israelites through the wilderness, and he asked this, the person in charge of that nation, can we walk through? And if we walk through, if our camels eat anything, if the Israelites themselves pick up anything, we promise to reimburse you. But the ruler of that nation said no, out of fear, because of what he saw took place out of Egypt and everything else, right? That they were conquering every place they were going. But that wasn't their motive here. But still, the ruler of that nation said no. And Moses and his people didn't say, "Oh, we're going through anyway," right? They walked around that nation, took the longer route, because they had to honor, that the borders. And then if you want
Yeah.
to go into the New Testament, and I'll digress here, like it's just all over, where even, God says himself in Acts, I believe it's Acts 17, where he talks about, I established the borders and the places where they should live. This is to
Yep.
hone on a culture. This is to hone on a separation of holiness and not holiness, etc., right? And if you're going to stay in that nation, like you mentioned, having assimilation, understanding that there's a culture, there is the rules of the law. We have, we don't tolerate the lawlessness here. We have a certain way of doing life here,
Yeah.
and it's unique to where you came from, and you have to respect that, or go back home, right? Just don't come in the first place. But you see that through all out the Bible, where there is, you know borders are definitely something God sets in play. If he didn't, then why would he cast Satan out of heaven? I mean, there's there's a distinction. And so all throughout the Bible where, and then we can talk about this illegal side, right? There's a legal side, and then we have the legal side of immigration as well, where our system is kind of backed up too. But if you're going to debate being, an illegal and having open borders, and we shouldn't have borders, that's just not biblical.
No. And it's funny. We talked about this right before you and I went on air, and I happened to have watched a pastor that was going through this same thing earlier this week, where again, especially throughout the Old Testament, that land, borders, culture, and who rules over it is an intricate part of the scripture for the reasons you just outlined. Without language, borders, and culture, you don't have a country, and that is necessary too, both from a religious perspective, because you want to have an area where it's safe for you to practice your religion, that you're able to also have that religious influence over the government there, even if the government itself is separate and secular. But these are important. Without language, borders, and culture, we don't have countries in the modern day. And they knew this 4,000 years ago when books of the Bible were being written, that you had to have language, borders, and culture in order to for your culture to thrive. That we're not all really this just giant blend. People do have their own interests, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's how humanity has always existed. You want to have your countrymen, your kinsmen, whatever. That's who you want to be with, and you don't want other people infiltrating that may have nefarious intent. It is very important to be able to protect our own from any sense, whether it's religious or secular, above all else. We have to each have our own safe havens, and you can't just open your borders up to somebody that wants to destroy you. Like, as you said, biblically, there was a distinction between invaders, people just choosing to come in, disrupting your culture, your community, your cities, whatever, and people who were allowed to be there, who had been vetted, so to speak, were bringing something to the other culture. If you go forward in time, I mean, this is what a lot of the Jewish groups did. Like, they would go into Rome or into Greece or whatever. They would bring their trades, their values. They would become intricate members of the community, and then spread out other places. This is something that was normal, and it should still be normal today. But they didn't want everybody there. There's places they were thrown out because they couldn't get along, or couldn't assimilate, or So, even with God's chosen people, this happened. There were areas where they could go in and they would behave as appropriately as they should, and there were others that they did not. And that's not always. Sometimes it was other reasons, but sometimes that is why they were thrown out. So the sword cuts both ways. And that's something we do need to remember, there's a reason to have borders and to have a nation and to have common languages and the other things that we're talking about right now, because you don't want a division within your own people, within your own borders. You don't need enclaves from other cultures, and they're disrupting the harmony that you're trying to build by having a cohesive culture.
Agreed. Yeah. All right, well, let's get to our first sponsor, and then we're going to continue on with today's podcast. This is so great. That's why I love having you on. Yeah. Okay, so let's get to our first sponsor. This is Your Skincare, one of the brands that I absolutely love. I want to share with you guys so you can see why I love this brand. And if you find something of use for yourself, you can get some discounts and coupon codes, etc. So watch this video. Brand is also one of my favorites, and this brand is called Your Skincare. This brand has tons of different options that you could choose from. They also have an A to Z set and also individual products that you can use. I've actually been using this brand for a full year, and their stuff delivers, and I often get compliments on my skin. So I'm super excited to share this one with you guys today. There are two products that I'm going to share in this video out of their entire line. So the first one is going to be the Purifying Clay Mask, and this clay mask, ladies, is like no other clay mask I have ever tried. It is top notch. And the reason why is because it has bentonite clay, salicylic acid, and glycolic acid as the three main active ingredients. That bentonite clay is going to help to detoxify the face. You have salicylic acid that allows this clay mask to tackle acne in 15 minutes. You will see your acne breakout totally diminished, and by the next morning, completely gone, just by using the clay mask. Also, this clay mask helps to tighten, firm, lift, and also brighten. And you will notice your skin brighten within your first use of using it. Yes, you heard that right. Usual clay
mask, it takes about 3 weeks for you to see that change. But this is the very first clay mask I have ever used that you see the change in your first use of using it. It is that powerful. Also minimizes and cleans out the pores as well, and just leaves you with this beautifully radiant skin. Now, if you have dry skin, it's recommended to use this clay mask once a week. And if you have oily skin like myself, you can use it up to twice a week. I'm telling you guys, when I use this clay mask, I really feel like my skin is set for the next few months before needing to go in with it again. The next product from them is going to be their lip balm. I love this lip balm because it has hyaluronic acid, shea butter, jojoba seed oil as your 3 main active ingredients, notwithstanding that there are inactive ingredients also that are also all oils. There's peppermint oil, fruit oil in here, raspberry seed oil, etc. Castor oil is also in here as well. So you have great ingredients in this lip balm, and this lip balm is made to tackle fine lines and wrinkles on the lips and also seal in moisture and plump the lips. I love it. And it's not a lip plumper, but it does make the lips look very nicely plumped and extremely hydrated. It is like a fan favorite from this brand. I have to say that all the products from your skincare are all formulated for sensitive skin. They're all clean, it's recyclable, it's all made here in the USA, and you can also use any of their products when you are pregnant. I love this brand so much that I had to partner with them. And so I go live on TikTok and they allow me to do giveaways, and I'm live for at least 2 hours doing these giveaways with my followers, and also live stream exclusive discounts. And these are discounts you can't get if you're not shopping live with me. So ladies, if you do want to hop in and you want to grab some free stuff for yourself, I highly recommend you follow me on TikTok, because that is where it is popping when it comes to all of these brands. Also, check that out. And remember that true beauty comes with living in the peace of God, purpose, and a life full of love and serving others. Again, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you subscribe, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
All right, guys. So there's where you can find the different coupon codes. So let me break this down so you understand where to go and how to use it. So at the top, you're going to see there the link to where you can go to their actual website. I would screenshot that so you can go back to it. And then if you use that link, if you type the link therein, you can get free birthday gifts, free refills, free shipping. It'll all be tagged to your account. And if you prefer to go through Amazon, you can use my coupon code there at the bottom of the screen, which is Aisha15 off. But you won't get the same type of freebies, okay, with that. It's just the 15% off. That is it. But both, I think, are great if you want to check out the brand themselves. I love this brand because they're completely clean, like I mentioned. You can use them when you're pregnant. I used them when I was pregnant with my daughter. I love this brand. It's one of my top favorites, and that's why I'm so happy to have them as a sponsor on this podcast as well, and to introduce them to you guys if you're brand new to them. So yeah, Your Skincare, they're here. They're based in California, and they make everything here in the US as well. So love, love, love this brand. Check them out, guys, when you get a chance. Okay, so the next thing I want to, I guess, hit on, or we can go into, is I have a little clip from the National Guard situation that took place where there was a shooting. Now, this clip is basically going to show you the kind of the tail end of that, where the guy was actually, I guess, taken down by another guardsman, not necessarily the 2 National Guardsmen that were actually shot. So this is kind of like the after they were shot footage, okay, that the New York Post put out. So let's watch this. Oh, just how dangerous that is. This was broad daylight.
You know, I mean, and again, it's an example of another tragedy that should not have happened. There is no way this guy should have been let into the country. I really want to get to the bottom of whatever it is he did for the CIA beforehand.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other angle of this, that unfortunately none of us trust the CIA anymore. Um, it's they've been involved in so many false flags and other things like this that I don't know. We need a real investigation into this guy, what his involvement was with the CIA, why he was brought here, what might have brought him there. I saw they're
Yeah.
going through his apartment yesterday that was in D.C., but I don't know if they found any other connections to other people, or if this was just this guy was just angry and it was a crime of opportunity. He saw these guardsmen. And what's really tragic is both of them volunteered to be there so other people could spend time with their families on Thanksgiving. The girl was only, I think, 20 years old and volunteered because she didn't, no significant other, no kids. Said, hey, I'll let some of my fellow guardsmen take a couple days off, go home, be with their families. And instead, she winds up getting shot in the face and murdered. And this other guy, same thing. He volunteered to be there. Hopefully he survives this and survives it intact. But I mean, it's just disgusting that this is what we've allowed. And this is part of the problem when you prioritize foreign nationals over your own people. I mean, you can never avoid all tragedy and all incident. Things are going to happen that are unexpected, but you should at least be able to keep the criminals out, or not be putting people in places where they have the ability to do immense harm, whether it's something like this or a lot of these CDL drivers that are killing people on the highway. I saw there was just another one in California yesterday.
Wow.
It's I don't know. I mean, it's just we've got to get to the bottom of this, and President Trump's really enraged by this, and I don't blame him. This whole Afghanistan withdrawal, if Biden had stuck with his original plan, we probably would not have had the 13 soldiers killed at Abbey Gate, instead of having this rushed panic the last few days before the Taliban was going to take back over. I mean, it's just such a tragedy on so many different levels. And to watch the media go out there now and blame President Trump for this, that it's his rhetoric on immigration that inspired this. I mean, it's just disgusting. And I know that they are being called out. MSNBC's got another guy, I don't know if they suspended him or not, that went out and blamed Trump on this. Well, I guess they're missed now. They're no longer MSNBC. But anyway, but and same with even some of these Democrats are out there blaming Trump. Trying to find who it was that was out there yesterday talking about this, and it's disgusting. And again, if you're going to go with that narrative, that means that you're going to allow foreign nationals to hold our country hostage, rather than do what's best for the American people. I mean, I'm just sick and tired of it.
I just sent you something. Maybe you can pull it up. It's kind of funny. It was posted by the White House, but I totally agree with you. I think to me, it's like you said, we need to do an investigation thoroughly into how, this. I know that you and I dissected how this guy got here. We looked at, those things, but then there's also that portion where he was, working for the CIA at one point in Afghanistan. And my thing is, we need to do a thorough investigation. And the second thing is, if this guy could trick the CIA, how radicalized and how advanced are they? I would, are we missing, how strategic these people really are to
Well,
be misled all this time for them to have an opportune time to take out someone like a National Guardsman or
well,
even a policeman. It's it's
to your
crazy.
point, this isn't the first time, as I kind of alluded to earlier. This was an ongoing problem the whole time we were in Afghanistan, where we would hire people as translators or in other roles, and maybe they would do that fine for a while, but very often, I don't want to say more often than not, because that's not quite true, but many times they would lead our troops into ambushes, or they'd get in a firefight and suddenly their Afghan interpreter is behind their lines shooting at them, and they've got to kill the guy. This happened more frequently. I know someone that somebody I went to high school with that was sent to Afghanistan with that this happened to their unit. Now, luckily, the guy didn't end up killing anybody that was on the U.S. side, but when they got in a firefight, he started shooting at them. So they had to take him out along with and he probably set up the ambush. He probably let people know somehow that they were going to be there, and then these other Taliban or other Islamic fighters set the ambush. Now, like I said, luckily everybody survived that was on the U.S. I think somebody did get wounded, but not seriously. But same thing, they had to kill their interpreter because he was firing at them. I do have the thing you sent set up now.
Go ahead and pull it if you can. I thought this was funny. So this was literally posted by the White House. I saw it this morning where they were labeling these offenders Hall of Shame, labeling the fake news, basically putting them on blast. And I believe if it weren't for Trump, finding these leftist media and sharing like their bias and then, just exposing this right here, I'm not sure we would even maybe we would come to a place where we understood more that these are leftist leaning type media coverages that we're getting, and we're not really getting the full scope of everything of what's taking place. And it's why it's leaning as hatred towards Trump, and it's a narrative where they take things he says and they spin it differently, or they take things completely out of context, or they refuse to cover a certain story because it doesn't fit what they want the American people to know. And it's just it's horrible the way that they do that as journalists. And so I'm thankful that he put that on blast. This is kind of funny. What I'm saying is I'm thankful that we as American are aware that we have to really do our own research and know the truth and not just lean on CNN or MSNBC or CBS News, etc. And I'm grateful for Grok. I'm grateful for these different types of AI tools that we have, but even using them, you still got to verify. So yeah.
Well, I got one other one that kind of adds to this. This is from Fox from a few days ago, but they were had Media Research Center on there, and I think this data came from Media Research Center. So what they do is go through and they watch news coverage for bias. And they had, this is where you guys probably heard me bring up this fact a gazillion times, that 87% of coverage of Kamala Harris was positive, while 87% of coverage on President Trump was negative. We still see that now. Like the national media, 92% of their coverage on President Trump is negative, while 59% on Biden was positive. They always, and a lot of times it is like how you choose to tell the story. It isn't necessarily that they're always lying about facts, but they will ignore certain things and focus on just the positive when it's Biden and just the negative for Trump. They always cast things in the worst possible light, unless it's something they really just can't avoid, like, a peace agreement signed between two countries that were going to war, whether it's India and Pakistan or Thailand and whoever it was. But they always choose, unless it's absolutely unavoidable, or you just look like a psychopath reporting it in the negative. That is always how they cast everything that Trump does. And that's how you build this narrative that he's just the orange monster destroying the country, blah, blah, blah. Because they don't give him credit for anything positive. They always focus on cast anything they can in a negative light. And it's just entirely dishonest.
Yeah. Until he has to himself shut them up. They would go mute on certain things because they saw he was winning in that area and they had to go find something else to cover. Or to blame the administration. And not everything is going to be perfect, I believe, with any administration, right? But they are so on the hunt to find something to kind of get the public eye to focus on, to call out Trump always.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some legitimate criticism, or even if they want to bring on guests from both sides to discuss whatever issue, that's fine. But the problem is they make the story the negative always. They never focus on the positive or how things are benefiting America. And it's also a lot of alarmism, whether that's the tariffs or anything else. There's a lot of people that still think that these are somehow going to destroy our country. In reality, quite the opposite's been true and proven true. Now, yeah, you can hone in on certain tariffs for certain items, where if they're not produced here and there's not an alternative country to get them from, yes, you might see a slight price increase on something. But again, by and large, these have been a net benefit to America. And we're going to start really seeing the fruits of that over the next 6 months to 9 months as some of these facilities come online, new jobs. Oh, Aisha might have frozen. All right, you're back.
Yeah, okay. I think we're back.
But I was just stating that, yeah, a lot of it is, how they choose to cover things. That's what crafts the narrative. And that's all the left really has right now, is this anti-Trump narrative, that most of their critiques are not based in fact, or not based in the reality that we're all living. Now, that isn't to say there aren't some things that being critical of is a good thing. Like, you and I have discussed, like bringing in 600,000 Chinese students. I don't see how that really benefits America. or, continuing the H-1B visas. So, I mean, there's things I'm critical of on President Trump, but they're mostly things where I feel like, the agenda's gotten away from him, or the wrong people are whispering in his ears. I went back and read the Agenda 47, the platform he ran on during this last election cycle. And there are some areas there where I would be critical, but it shouldn't be 92% of coverage. I mean, that's insane.
I know, it's wild. That's why, especially what he has accomplished in under a year in the
Yeah.
second term. So I want to say this before we move on too, because we're kind of getting there for time. Um, what Trump has done to crack down on what's taking place with the National Guardsmen as a result of that, actually. So there's a nationwide pause on asylum decisions, and I'll read this out. It's USCIS Director Joseph Edlow announced a full halt to all asylum approvals starting November 28th, yesterday, pending a comprehensive vetting overhaul. Officers can process cases but cannot finalize grants. This affects over 2.2 million pending applications, with the review targeting all approvals from the Biden era. And then you have a visa halt for Afghans. This builds on earlier 2025 travel bans targeting Afghanistan and other nations, and reviews and revocations as well. So thank God something's being done to look at this now, because we're starting to see this constant push from the Middle East in our own nation to establish something, to disrupt what we have going on. Like we mentioned, the Columbia University, Harvard situation where you have these Hamas supporters. And I love what Marco Rubio said, like, you getting a student visa, that's not like a constitutional thing. We don't have to
Yeah.
guarantee you that. Matter of fact, it's the opposite way. You tell us, you show us why you are deserving of this visa. And if you don't disrupt anything, you don't break our constitution, you don't stop students from going to school, then you are worthy to stay here. But when you start doing that, we can take away your visa at any time. And I love that they he's just very nonchalant and blunt with that.
Yeah.
'Cause I think we need to set a precedent, because it's
It's a
it's gotten out of
privilege.
hand.
Well, yeah, and it is a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be able to study at our universities. And if you're somebody that doesn't respect or value that, and instead are going to attack your fellow students or attack the American way of life, then sorry, you can go back to whatever third world hellhole you came from, and you can go complain about the United States there. We don't have to give you a voice or let you in here to go cry about things. You can just go home. We don't need you. If you're going to be critical of us, then you're not somebody we want here anyway. Go make Afghanistan great again. Whatever.
Oh gosh. I love when you say that. Go make Afghanistan great again. Okay. Let me hit on this really quick, and then we'll talk about Minnesota. Okay? Because I know I want you to give us a little bit more information on what you know about what's happening there when it comes to the welfare system and the fraud.
Yeah.
But before we get there, we have, if you can put up this asset, the Isaac Accords. So I just discovered this, guys. As we all know, that Trump started the Abraham Accords back in 2020, and then he continued that 20-point Gaza peace plan as a part of that in 2025. And there's an expansion of a peace agreement with different nations in the Middle East, like Bahrain, Kazakhstan, etc. And there seems to be this just push for the Abraham Accords. And I know that Trump has condemned at the UN a Palestinian state, but the rhetoric with inside of this plan is saying that if there are certain conditions met, like there's normalization, there's trade and all that happening, as if Israel can definitely be in charge of basically the military operations there. There's some guarantees, like what Zelensky said, the security guarantees that are put in place that the Palestinians or that their government does not want to agree to, and I don't think they will ever. And
No.
following these agreements, Trump has said he's floated the idea that there's a possibility for a Palestinian statehood. I hope that never ever happens, but I don't think it will, because the demands that Trump has made, I think they won't agree to it.
Yeah. No
You
chance in
know,
hell.
yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
you go
especially
back.
when you see what's happening in our own nation, like this stuff, I think we're waking up, or maybe this will help us Americans that are naive to Islam and like, why they're not that bad? Why does media cover them? Like, why are people saying this? This will help you to wake up to the radicalization and what these people aim are, and that they are not afraid to take a life.
Yes.
I mean, if you go back to the guy, the Afghan national that did this, I'm saying that because his name is very difficult to pronounce. I don't want to butcher it, and I know you don't want to butcher
Yeah.
it
Neither
either.
one of us could figure out how to say it before the show,
Yeah,
so we're
I'm
just
not
going to
going to
skip
attempt
it.
that. I am not going to attempt it. But they said that he shouted what Allah Akbar or something like that.
Yeah, and you can hear
Allah is
it
great,
on
I
one of
believe
the
is the
other
translation or something.
recordings. There's another recording where you can't see what's happening that I saw circulating, where you can hear him screaming that following the gunshots. Yeah, the I think that the Palestinians back in, I can't remember if it was 97 or 98, but when Clinton was over there trying to establish a peace agreement with Arafat, they literally gave them everything they asked for. And then afterwards, he still refused to sign. If they don't want peace, they're never going to have their own state. They're not going to agree to hand over their weapons or any other countermeasures to make sure they can't continue attacking the Israelis. It's just not going to happen. It's not in their nature. It's not what they want. And even if they do sign something like that, I'd be very afraid, because then they're probably building up armament for a few years for another major October 7th style attack. So they can't be trusted. And then real quickly on this Isaac Accords, I think this is a good idea. Now, obviously, most of South America, probably all of South America, has already acknowledged Israel and their right to exist, which is one of the big points with the Abraham Accords. But I do think it's a good idea to strengthen ties, especially at a time when Venezuela and Brazil, for sure, have said want a Palestinian state. And I'm not sure about Colombia, but I'd imagine they're trending that direction right now if they haven't already said something or done something in support of Palestine. So yeah, I think this is a good way to send a message, set the tone, and see where everybody stands in South America. Because at the end of the day, I think most countries down there would be more than willing to sign this, and that's a good way to expand their own trade, expand Israel, and again, put everybody, really see where everybody stands, because that's sort of the problem now. And with Brazil, especially, and Venezuela heading the wrong direction, Venezuela has basically opened their border to terrorism. We know that they gave Iran a giant plot of land there that's been used for various things. We know Hezbollah has training camps there. Hamas is heavily involved. So this is not a good nation. Venezuela needs turned around very quickly. They're already basically a failed narco state, and that's again, they've done a lot to benefit Islam. So yeah, something needs to be done.
Now, and with this Isaac Accords from President Javier, I think it's probably Spanish, his name would be Milei. The goal is to create a similar framework of normalization and cooperation between Israel and multiple Latin American countries. In short, the Abraham Accords are the most significant expansion of Israel's diplomatic relations in the Middle East since the peace treaties, says, with Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. So very similar thing, like you mentioned, normalization, trade, open that expansion, making, broader expansion there. So I think it's a good move.
Yeah. I think it'll benefit all countries involved. And I think the bigger thing is to send a message that Israel has a right to exist. That you're not going to support these Islamic terrorist states that surround them. And yeah, I forgot about Jordan, so we'll give them some credit too. The King of Jordan's actually done, by and large, a very good job of cracking down on Islamic violence. He pulled people off the border following the October 7th attacks. Pulled people away from the border that were planning on assisting and attacking Israel. So I think they've, by and large, done a good job. They're I wouldn't say it goes far to say an ally, but they do understand the way the situation is, and the king there does not want an expansion of violence, especially not within his own borders.
Right. Now I'm getting to Minnesota because we got, I guess, a few minutes left. I want to talk about, hit on these two states, Minnesota and then Texas. So you mentioned, of course, when we were off camera, about the, I guess, the welfare system there, how many immigrants were on the system there, and there was so much fraud. Can you go into a little bit of that, what's taking place?
Yeah, and let me pull this up so I can actually see the headline here. Minnesota madness. Radical Democrat judge Sarah West overturns jury's guilty verdict, frees Somali immigrant who stole $7.2 million in a Medicaid fraud scheme. So this was mostly billing. He was. Oh no! And the judge's decision is even more insane. Like, they interviewed several people from the jury in this article and others I've seen about it, and they've all basically said, like, this is a clear-cut case. There was no doubt that the defendant and his wife were ripping off the U.S. government for years. That there was just overwhelming evidence, not to mention all the other secondary evidence of, them buying luxury cars, luxury clothes, taking vacations, just spending, $80,000 on a jewelry somewhere, just insane nonsense. Now, the judge, and I still can't get my brain around this. I guess her excuse is the prosecutors didn't look for other people that could possibly have been guilty of this. So basically, they didn't do the defense's job for them and find excuses of why this guy may not have been guilty, which that's not their job. They're the prosecutors. They're supposed to prosecute the case, show the jury all the reasons this person is guilty, not act as their defense. The other thing that she floated in her decision, which again is insane, not to mention incredibly racist, said that basically theft is part of Somali culture, and that we need to understand that. Which again, like, that should make your brain explode. I don't understand these blue-haired moonbats, even when they don't have blue hair. But I mean, this particular example is so bad. Even Keith Ellison is upset about it and he's a Muslim. Soft on crime, top prosecutor in Minnesota, but even he couldn't believe that this judge reversed the jury's decision. Like, it's blatantly obvious this guy is 100% guilty. But yeah, I guess that's okay. But it sounds like they are going to pick up the case and possibly overrule this judge, because there's just literally piles and piles of evidence. There is no doubt whatsoever this guy is guilty of defrauding the American people of at least $7.2 million. And he's not the only one. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope more Americans, especially those on the left who didn't like Doge, can see why this was so needed. The rehaul of all of our systems where the government is responsible for this money, and there could be possible fraud or any area where there could be waste. We have to look at that, especially if we want to bring down this national debt. We want to be a country that is looking at the future and preparing our next generation for the future. Like, those things are important.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things we're starting to see is there are just huge numbers of these fraud cases from the Somali community up there, from COVID fraud, which, by the way, Ilhan Omar's husband, not her brother husband, the other husband, were involved in. Same thing, that they've got that dismissed against her husband, but they're still prosecuting the restaurant. And I think that was $5 point something million in COVID fraud. And then they took advantage of some other program that's supposed to be delivering meals to hungry children. Weren't delivering the 5,000 meals a day, but we're billing the government for it. But I mean, this is something that is rampant up there with certain groups within the Somali community. And as President Trump just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to remove the temporary protected status for all the Somali migrants, and the left's out there melting down and whatever. But yeah, if you've been here 30 years and you couldn't be bothered to go through the citizenship process, maybe we don't need you or want you here. At some point, you've got to make a choice. Do you want to put Somalia first? Well, in that case, go back there and help fix some of their problems. Or do you want to be a U.S. citizen? I guess my other thing is, just because we give people a temporary refugee status to bring them away from a war, that doesn't mean we automatically have to make all of them citizens. And maybe, part of the problem. Sorry.
I agree with you. Yes.
Maybe, I suggested this kind of like jokingly before, but I'm getting more and more serious about it. Like, if we are going to bring in people to protect them from war, civilians, maybe we need to start putting them in Guam or someplace like that, where they can't filter out to the rest of the United States and then stay here illegally. So they really are away from the war temporarily. And then we can move them all back there when the conflict's settled. Because, again, this is just another basically exploiting loopholes or exploiting our legal system, all the holes there, to just come over here and become permanently dependent on the U.S. taxpayer.
Yeah, I partially agree with you. I just feel I kind of feel burdened for the people who are trying to do it right. I don't know what that percentage is, but I have to have some thought that there are some people that are trying to do it right, that would love to live here in the United States and make a better life and just totally leave the past behind them.
I feel like if you had 30 years to do that and you didn't, then maybe it should have been a higher priority in your life. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I would understand even a year. Maybe you do want to go back there to begin with, and you're waiting for the conflict to end. But yeah, after 30 years, I have no sympathy. Um, uh, and
I
maybe
agree.
I'm
That is a
wrong.
long time to not have your stuff together. So yeah. Um,
Yeah, and I feel like
and I think we do
when
have
we
to look at the legal side of things too, in our system, or on our immigration system, because there's some issues there too.
yeah, I mean, I feel like it was never designed for this. Um, a lot of this could have been prevented if we would have just like enforced the rules earlier on. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, on one hand, I do feel bad for the exceptions that do want to be here and do want a better way of life. But unfortunately, at some point too, you do have to make drastic decisions, because at some point the United States, we're the ones that are going to end up on life support if we don't do something about this. So I do feel bad for a small number of people that were here for the right reasons, wanted to make a better life, are not committing crimes, are working, are doing the things they're supposed to. But at some point, we've got to dig ourselves out from under this. And if that means there's some collateral damage in the process, I'm sorry, but that's the way it's going to have to be, because we can't go on forward like this, spending, potentially $4 billion approximately per month just on SNAP benefits for illegal aliens. That
Yeah.
cannot continue.
Okay, last thing I want to get to, and I agree with you on that last point. Governor Abbott, his designation of CAIR and the MB Muslim Brotherhood as being terrorist organizations, um, talking about their funding, as well. I think that's a great move for Texas. I feel like more states should follow suit, especially when you look at the history of CAIR and the things they funded and their involvement with, I believe it was the Holy Land case. Uh,
Yep.
yeah, there's so much there, and I remember you mentioning to me, even I looked it up and I saw it was true that there is some involvement with Zohran Mamdani when it comes to CAIR and its affiliates. So I think that should definitely be looked into, and we need to have more nations stand up and
Yeah.
condemn this.
Yeah, CARE has been a problem for a long time. They were an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation case, which was laundering money over to various terrorist entities all around the world. They've been involved defending basically every terrorist that's ever been arrested, and were one of the largest funders, if not the largest funder, of Mamdani's campaign. I think it was the largest single entity, but that's if you count
Yes.
like all their little subsidiaries and everything else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
unfortunately,
then
like
they
they're
have one of their founders doing like 65 years, I believe, in Texas jail.
sounds about right. I know there's numerous other people that have been under their arms that are in jail, including that lawyer that was defending several terrorists in New York. Then we caught her passing secret information over to them that was then being transferred back to Al Qaeda to then attack U.S. forces in Iraq or Afghanistan. I don't remember which.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is they're clearly not here to serve American interests. They're here to expand the caliphate. They want things global. Um, and unfortunately, like, we need to strip their tax exempt status and just boot them out of the country. Muslim Brotherhood, obviously, they are a literal terrorist organization, have no business having offices in the United States. But yeah, we've got to start taking this problem seriously, and not falling for the trope. Oh well, this is racist or this is Islamophobic. No. This is the reality. This is what the people, what these entities and organizations want. They want the destruction and downfall of America. It does not align with our
Yeah.
Constitution, our values, or
They're
anything
the
else. We
big
just got to,
three.
yeah, call the problem what it is.
Yeah. I mean, they've constantly said that deaf to Israel, deaf to America.
No.
I do want to, as we end on our podcast today, so thank everyone for tuning in and watching. Make sure that you subscribe and you follow. And in Mike's podcast is the Insurrection, and he brings on key people to chime in on certain specific topics as well, which is great. His podcast is awesome. So I would encourage you guys to check it out too on X, and on Rumble, right?
Yeah, X, Rumble, we're all over the place. Kick, YouTube occasionally, Getter, anywhere we can stream to, we send the show out. And that's Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern.
Awesome. Okay. And so I do want to end in prayer. What I'd like to do is I want to pray for the families, the Guardsman family, and I also want to cover our nation. Okay. So I'm just going to end in prayer, guys, before we end our podcast today. So if you will, just wherever you are, you can bow your head, close your eye, however you would like to pray is fine. There's not a specific thing in the Bible, but I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to bow my head. So Lord, I thank you so much for this beautiful nation. I thank you for your protection. And I ask God right now that you would heal the hearts of the families involved in this shooting that took place in Washington, God. I pray for that woman's family who passed away, that 20-year-old whose life was in shortly. Your word says that you are close to the brokenhearted. So please let them know that you are near. Lord, let them feel your presence. Let be with them, be their strength in this time, God. Where they can't make sense of it, help them to quiet those doubts, Lord, and the why that could lead them into a place that's not healthy, Lord. I pray, God, against any depression. Pray against any long term grieving, Father, that they would be able to come out of this stronger, Jesus. I pray that they even begin to do movements in their own way that helps to curb the issues that are taking place in our nation, and that you would give them insight into that. Lord, I pray for this man who I'm aware of right now, Lord, is still alive. And I ask God that you would help him to pull through, strengthen his body, Lord, heal every single portion of his body, that he might pull through this situation. And it just might be just another testimony in his mouth of your goodness in life. Lord, and we just pray and cover this nation. We ask for your divine cover over this nation, Father God. We ask that you can continue to expose. We ask that you protect Donald Trump's life. We ask that you keep the administration, Father. Keep them in the close knit, keep them tight, Lord. Help them to be honest with the American public. Help them to walk before you in an honest way. I ask that you even bring conviction if there's something that they're not doing right. And please give Donald Trump wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of your ways, Jesus. And we just thank you for this beautiful nation. We ask you for unity among this nation, God, in one nation under God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Mike, thank you so much for being on with me and sharing your commentaries. Always, always a pleasure to have you on and hear your insights.
Well,
Guys,
thank you for
you
having
can
me.
tune in with us. Thanks. Tune in with us next Saturday, or with me next Saturday, 2 to 3 p.m. And again, the also you can check out the insurrection as well.